Hello, welcome. I'm Hannah, and happy spring to those who celebrate. I love spring because I hate when it's cold, and I'm excited to be able to be outside without risking my life. That's always fun. But when it comes to what I think of as spring makeup, my instinct is that I don't like it. I feel like when it comes to the style for each season, I like the style of fall the best. And spring feels like the farthest away from it. It's probably also just from traumatic experiences using pastels. I don't really like pastels. We'll probably talk about that more a little bit later, but today I wanted to explore spring makeup a little bit and see if I could come up with a look that's true to spring, but also is something that I like and I feel comfortable in, and I'm not just drenching my face in white-based pastels that give me no definition and I don't like, you know? So last week I crowdsourced. I asked on my Instagram what comes to mind when you think of spring makeup, and I was hoping for enough variants and answers that we could come up with a full face without saying I'm doing a full face with it. So I'm gonna read some of the answers. I see fresh-faced, less full coverage, more dewy and glossy, fairy vibes, less about the colors and more about feeling fresh, but I guess also pastels. Pastels, iridescent, super sparkly sheer toppers, light pinks, mauves, corals, pastels, emerging flower and sky colors, glow and sparkle, dew, a pastel matte crease with a light corresponding shimmer and a pastel waterline, periwinkle eyeshadow. I like that. Back on my bright blush bullshit. I love that. Less base makeup like contour and full foundation, glossy, brighter lips, I just think fresh, pastels, 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 pastels. So I'm going to attempt to dive into colors a little bit here and talk about what it is about pastels that I feel like I don't like. But something that I think is important to note is that our interpretations of colors are so subjective. And even in the makeup community, I feel like the way we talk about colors a lot of the time is very comparative. We're comparing one thing to another, or we're comparing this to our idea of that color. I think that's especially true in certain color families where what I'm thinking when I say mauve might be very different from you. The same with words like taupe, or when I say pinkish purple, the color that flashes in your mind might be different than the color that I mean in my mind. Also, pastels isn't a true categorization of color. I actually just found out in my little bit of research before this that the idea of pastel colors is based on the art supply, the pastel. So compared to other categorizations like hue, brightness, saturation, pastel is kind of more up to interpretation. My favorite colors to wear both in clothing and in color cosmetics are saturated colors. Colors that are rich in pigment, items that feel like if you were to dye them, they couldn't soak in any more of the dye than they already have in them. Colors are generally made pastel by increasing the brightness and decreasing the saturation. The brightness is the scale of how light or dark it is. So when mixing together paints or pigments, it's done by adding a lot of white to them. And then desaturation is the scale that basically ends in a gray scale. So once it's into the desaturated portion, it's just getting more gray. And I think it's that gray factor to pastels that make me not like them, because I do like lighter shades if they still feel saturated. For instance, I saved an image of light pink, and I'm going to show in the saturation tab that if you lift the saturation, it's a vibrant and light pink. And then if you lower the saturation all the way down, it's gray. And anywhere between the middle and the bottom is a grayed out pink. Conversely, with the brightness, if you go all the way lower in the brightness, it becomes a bolder pink, and all the way higher, it becomes white. I think for some people's definitions of pastels, it's only to do with the brightness. And I think even with this, if you add a lot of white, it takes away the pigment of the color. And when it's in that territory, I personally don't like it also. As another example, my dress is a light pink. Light pink by definition, any pink by definition has white in it, but I still think of this as a saturated version of light pink. And to contrast it, I have this like sports bra. It was hard to find anything in my room that's desaturated as an example, but I feel like this is a similar hue of pink, but you can see this one's very desaturated. This shade is like closer to gray, and this is not a color that I like. I do think it also has to do with my skin tone. Like when I'm talking about clothes and makeup, of course they're like against my skin. And I found in times that I work with pastels, it just doesn't give me that contrast that I like to have in the things that I wear. A couple years ago, I had gotten the Pastel Dreams palette from Give Me Glow, and I did several videos with that when I first got it, and I kind of landed on the fact that I didn't like it. Looking back at that, I don't feel like those pastels have the desaturated tone, but I do think they have like the brightness too far up that brings it to a spot that I don't like it. And then additionally, with the formulation of cosmetics, those very white base shadows I think are harder to use, and there's not looks that I like to wear that feature those like really white based mattes. Glaminatrix did come out with a palette pretty recently though, where they have some options of darker tones in a pastel palette. I definitely like that better. I'm not like in the market for pastels. As I said, I don't like them that much, but I do think that a palette that has darker options is easier to work with than just mixing pastels with pastels and having no contrast at all in the look. So all that to say, I don't have really true pastels left in my makeup collection. I feel like I've weeded those out over the years because I don't use them, but the one palette that I feel kind of fits in, but it might be a little bit up to interpretation, is the Sugar Pill Fun Size palette. Now, I don't think these are true pastels, but I do think that like they might look like pastels on me. Particularly, I'm thinking about this periwinkle shade, and one of the comments did say specifically periwinkle. So I put on eye primer, and I'm just gonna set it with a bone-colored matte. So my goal is to use this as a liner, like as a graphic liner. There's a couple things I'm nervous about here. I feel like I'm gonna need water to pick it up. I don't really want to like chip some out. I'm wondering if I can like swatch it on my hand, wet a brush, and pick it up that way. I don't know. Additionally, the last time I tried to use an eyeshadow as a liner, it creased so badly, like it transferred so badly because of how hooded my eyes are. So for this, I want to try to stay around the hood, which is fun because it will make it more visible regardless of whether or not my eyes are open, in addition to making it more bulletproof on me. So let's see if I just came up with something or if there's a reason that no one does this. See, that looks fairly pastel when it's swatched out because it doesn't have like the saturation of laying on top of itself in the pan. Try to get a little bit more product out. That is looking pretty. Okay, I have water in a spray bottle. I don't think this is wet enough to work. Ah. Okay, that's like the most subtle amount of pigment, but maybe we're onto something here? Oh no. Okay, these lines aren't connected, but I'm kind of okay with that. I think it looks more graphic and interesting. I'm just gonna try to work on like building up the color a little bit. I think if this will dry and stay like this, that's pretty good. This line is getting pretty thick, but I feel like because the color is pretty light, it doesn't look that bad. Yeah, that did go pretty smoothly. I do want to add some more iridescence to the eyes. I feel like a lot of people were saying iridescence, but I want to give this a chance to set a little bit. So I think I want to move on to the face and then come back to the eyes. For the base makeup, I'm seeing things like fresh-faced, less base makeup, dewy. I only have one foundation, but I think I can kind of like dress it up and use some other dewy or glowy products in conjunction to hopefully give that like dewy look. So I'm going to use the Merit Great Skin as like a primer. This is an oil. I love how like luxe it is, and I feel like it works pretty well as a base for more glowy skin. And then for my foundation, as I said, I do only have this one foundation, which is the CoverGirl Clean Fresh Skin Milk. It's a pretty light coverage foundation anyway, but I think I am going to mix it with these other products. Why not? And that will make it less coverage also on top of that. So the other products are this Lisa Eldridge Elevated Glow in Crystal Nebula, and then I have the Supergoop Glow Screen. I also only have one concealer, which I'm going to put on before I blend this. It's the Tarte Shape Tape. I know people would probably think of using like a less coverage concealer, but I found when I've tried less coverage concealers, I don't like how my makeup looks. So I'm just going to try to do a little bit right there because that's where it bothers me. And actually, yeah, maybe I'll leave that because usually I do a little concealer on the tip of my nose, on my chin, on my forehead, but maybe this is how we switch it up for the fresh-faced spring look. Are we dewy? I don't know. Definitely not full coverage. I'm also just going to do the slightest amount of powder under my eyes. I know I don't really think of that for a dewy look, but I am trying to find the intersection where I also like this, and I feel like if I skip this, I'm setting myself up for failure. But similar to the concealer, usually I set wherever I have my concealer, and that's usually more places than today. Today, I'm just doing right under the under eyes. Or right in the under eyes, which is on the under eyes. For blush, I definitely know what to do. A lot of answers said pink blush or bright blush. I don't have that many options for blush, but I do have this one from Merit in the shade Stockholm, which is like a bright pink. I also love using this when I'm doing a less powder intensive look. So this will work perfectly. I also think it looks good with like the less color on the eyes. It can kind of have its moment. Pretty. That's a bright blush. No one said anything about bronzer or contour, but I'm just going to use a little bit of this Rare Beauty contour stick because it works with my cream regimen, and also I'm scared I won't like the look if I totally leave off any type of bronzer. I could also just opt for like a blush in these areas, which I do sometimes, but I wouldn't want to use like this bright pink blush like on my forehead. I feel like that'd be too vibrant there. When it comes to these cream products also, I don't really mind if they look like a little messy. I feel like that's kind of the fun of it. And I just love like the carefree nature of using my hands. And then for my highlighter, I'm going to use the Merit highlighting balm in the shade Kava. And this I like using with my finger to warm it up, and then I pat it on. These Merit products were all sent to me, by the way, but not recently. Haven't heard anything from them in a while, but these were all sent to me last year or the year before that. Yeah, I always like this one too. I feel like it plays well with other makeup, and it gives a very like natural dew. I might even try to use this more spots. Like what if I did? I don't know if you could even tell that I did that. But I feel like that's a spot I would get like a little sweaty. Yeah, I feel like that's sufficiently dewy, right? So back to the eyes, there were a lot of mentions of pink and a couple mentions of iridescent. So I'm going to use this iridescent from the Shine by SD Glam Smitty collab. It's the shade Celestial. And I'm just going to try to pat a little bit on to the inner half. Yeah, that's pretty. Oh, that's really pretty. I could do the whole lid, but I feel like the fun placement kind of keeps it fresh. Pretty. I'm gonna do that for my inner corners also. Doop. Eh? Why not? Why not? I'm definitely going to do my waterline as a color because that was mentioned, but I'm trying to think about my lower lash line because I could go in with more of this blue, but I feel like if I do, it'll become the center point of the look, and I think it will make it harder to notice the more like subtle pops of color, like comparatively subtle pops of color, like the pink blush and the liner thing we did. So for that reason, I'm thinking about doing a matte just to add like a little bit of definition there and not steal the show. It also makes sense in like keeping it true to me because, as I said, not having contrast or definition is the type of thing that makes me generally not like pastel looks. So this is just like the Kylie Mattes palette, and I think I'm going to use the third one in Rust. That's what I usually go in with for my transition. I hope it's not too reddish. I think I like it. It almost does kind of look like a color. As I said, the way I use it's usually on a fluffier brush, so I don't see it this intense. But I think the tone is a nice contrast to like both my features and the tones of the colors we put on. I'm just gonna tight line quickly with the smallest black liner you ever did see, because I always do. Love that. And then for my waterline, I think I'm gonna use this liner. This is Priscilla from Haus Labs, but this is from the Haus Labs when it was an Amazon brand. This is the only product I thought was worthwhile, and I'm very sad they don't have it anymore. Of course, now it's barely swatching. Haven't used it in a little bit. Hard to find like a good pigmented waterline color. All right, I'm a little nervous about this. Should I switch gears? This isn't working that well. Maybe I'll sharpen this. Okay, now we're in business. I wish it was more of the same blue, but I still like it. For lips, I'm seeing pink, I'm seeing glossy. So I'm gonna start with the Charlotte Tilbury lip liner in Pillow Talk. I feel like this leans very pink on me. And then I have the Charlotte Tilbury lipstick in Dance Floor Princess, which is a lighter pink. And over top, I have this Refi lip gloss in the shade Rosewood. I'm gonna do the mascara off camera just so we can have some type of reveal. And here is the finished look, my take on spring makeup. I think in person it looks a lot dewier than it looks on camera, because when I'm looking in my mirror, that's almost the part that I feel the least comfortable with. My skin is relatively normal to dry, so I feel like it takes a lot for me to look very dewy, but looking in the mirror, I feel like I look like I do on like the hottest day of summer where I'm like out and about all day, and I feel like it looks like I need to take a shower, like I need to reset. I do think I would get used to seeing myself more dewy if I did it more often. Like when I stopped doing winged liner every day, I thought I looked so weird without winged liner, and now I feel like that's how I look. Like how I look is how I look without winged liner. My favorite is definitely the eyes though. Like I'm happy that I took the more pops of color approach. I think this iridescent within a more graphic liner is so pretty. And I could definitely see myself recreating this. I even like the uneven shape, even though it wasn't my intention. I think it makes it look more dynamic. And then also realistically, if I were to do this look, I'd probably put on a more neutral lip. I think in a way, the pink lip feels like a little bit more cartoony, a little bit more of like a caricature of a person in spring makeup than something I would naturally do. Like each of the products that I use are products that I like and use, but I would grab for any of them with a more neutral product to try to like balance out the tone a little bit. So putting them all together is like a little bit of a shock to me. I am very curious to hear what you guys think. Are these pastels? Do you like pastels? Does this look like spring makeup? I think my funniest takeaway or most interesting takeaway or thought I'm having at this moment is that I feel like the things that are meant to look like spring or summer makeup are meant to look a little bit more effortless. Like we're doing pops of color instead of like a full eye look, because it's supposed to look like, you know, you just tossed it on and left. The less high coverage foundation is meant to look more like your natural skin, like you just tossed something on and left, or maybe you just woke up like that. But in actuality, it's like just as many products, if not more, just as much time, if not more, than doing what I normally do for my makeup, regardless of the season. It's almost like I'm cosplaying as someone who just like, you know, woke up in the flowers, rubbed some berries on her cheek, and then was out. And you know, I'm not opposed to that. Makeup is for fun, but it can also make us feel like who we at times wish we were. And I think it's a little bit of a superpower to have the ability to transform into a garden fairy on the day that I want to be a garden fairy. I'm going to wrap this up here. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe. It really means a lot. I also have a Patreon, I'll have linked down below. I also have a fashion channel, I'll have linked down below. Either way, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. Bye.